listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author Sarah Box, where you get the inside scoop on the steps action takers and decision makers take to align their purpose to their principles and achieve their goals in business and life. We focus on the mantra, no labels, no limits, no excuses. Each week, you'll hear from remarkable guests who have overcome challenges and obstacles to succeed in the face of adversity. By listening to their stories, you'll get practical tips, tools, and resources you can implement today to bust through your own internalized prisons of worry and doubt. And now, without further ado, please welcome your commanding coach with plenty of chutzpah and heart, Sarah Box.
Hi there, everybody. This is Sarah, your host of the No Labels, No Limits podcast, a podcast all about shedding our limiting labels and beliefs so that we can each live our dreams and be more of who we were created to be in this world. And this week, we are joined by Mindy Drewer. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Mindy. She's a mixture of a lot of different experiences, as are we all. So not only has she been a pastor's wife for 25 years, 11 of those doing youth ministry. So think about the breadth of experience here she has. She has a degree in theater. Youth ministry works there nice. She's been a director of a childcare center for 10 years, and she is currently reading The Enneagram for Spiritual Formation by A.J. Sherrill. And that is always of interest to me to find out what are people reading and learning from. And her purpose is to guide those she serves into joy and freedom. So take a breath with that one, just feeling like you're being guided into your own joy and freedom. That's Mindy. As an Enneagram coach, she does this specifically through using a typing tool that really helps release us from dissatisfaction, self-condemnation, and shame. And that's how our gateway into joy and freedom. So it's this same tool that actually opened the doors for her to break through her own limiting labels and beliefs. And she says that throughout her life. Actually, let me ask you guys to pause who are listening and see if you can relate to this. This may tell you a little bit about something about yourself. Mindy says that throughout her life, she constantly felt the burden of trying to please everyone and to do everything right. Heavy burden, and that included her teachers at school, her supervisors at work, and even the preaching and learning at church. She says she's always experienced some level of anxiety about the consequences of getting it wrong. Phew, heavy load, Mindy, to bear. But finally, she reached her own point of dissatisfaction, and that's where she made a change. She decided there had to be something more. So today we're going to dig into that with Mindy and also what she has learned since that time. We're going to find out more about what was the point she made the change, how understanding her Enneagram type, the why behind her thinking, believing, and acting has made a difference for her. And then something folks don't always consider with the Enneagram, and that is time stances. So I'm going to ask Mindy to speak more on that. And then she has a great tagline, which I'm not going to share with you yet. But I'm going to ask her how she came to it because it so much resonates with me. But ultimately, Mindy truly hopes that we each can see from her journey and the Enneagram how we can each grow into our best self. So with all that, let me now welcome today's guest, Mindy Drewer. Welcome, Mindy.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
I've been looking forward to talking to you. I always have the privilege of reading a little bit more about our guests before they come live, and I start getting really excited. Like, ooh, I can't wait to find out more. And even with that little background, I could go in so many directions. So I'm going to stay focused. You know, You've got a long path behind you of learning and growing. So let's start with this. Would you share a little bit of your story? Like what led up to that point at which you said, I have to make a change?
One time I was in a Bible study and we were sharing, going around the circle and sharing. And what I kept hearing from women who were in their 60s, 70s, 80s, was how much shame they felt and how much burden they felt. And I knew that I felt some of that as well, but I thought, man, these are women who have been Christians for years, who have, dedicated their lives to Christ and been doing Bible studies. This wasn't a new Bible study for them. They've been doing them for 40, 50 years. Why are they feeling this? What is that? Why should we continue to feel that? And that's really when I started saying there's something wrong here with the way that we are approaching, the way that we are expressing God's grace to people, putting so much burden on one another. And the Bible just talks so much about God's grace and his desire for us to be free of those burdens. But, I think that sometimes as Christians, we want to put a burden on others so that we sort of make a reason for you to need Christ, right? But the freedom that we find in him can be so releasing. And I've really done a lot of research, not head research, but research with my own walk of life. Yes, there's been head research involved, but also like actually experiencing it and allowing Christ to change me.
So that I am a 5. So I think everything comes in through the brain, right? It's like, okay, wait a minute. Okay, that sounds really theoretical. So how because it's like, I let this happen. So I'm imagining other listeners are going, okay, I kind of get that you made a huge pivot.
Right.
But how did that what were some of your first steps or even some of the challenges? Because I can imagine here you are in a group, people have been doing this for years. You're basically thinking there's a different or possibly better way to actually live this. I think I'll just upset the apple cart. How did that go for you?
So my husband is a pastor, and he was going through a lot of similar ideas at the same time I was. And so, and he's got, more of a background of education and finding books and constant support from other pastors and stuff along that line. At the time, our conference, that we're part of the Free Methodist Conference, and our conference was encouraging soul formation, connected to Soul Formation Academy. There was a lot going on at that time with people that we knew. And so I got together with someone that I knew had gone through the Soul Formation Academy, and she directed me to some books to start with. And I was so thrilled with those books. I kind of started my own little Bible study that ended up including the books. And some people weren't very interested in that, but I found a small group of women that were very excited in the same way that I was. And we got together for several months and spent time just in the books, in the Word, listening to Christ, but also practicing it during the week, taking what we were learning and then talking about it with one another and encouraging one another and having action steps for the next week. The next year we moved, my husband and I moved to a different town, and I had the opportunity to attend the Soul Formation Academy myself. And that was wonderful because then I was getting the book learning and the head learning along with the heart learning, because it was very interactive. We were partnered up so that we had triads that worked together and met regularly, and just encouraged one another to grow spiritually. But it was a very specific way of growing spiritually, with a direction. And that just was huge for me. That made it such a difference. And I found such a release of burden during that time and learned so much more about living in freedom. But it was a journey. It wasn't like overnight, suddenly I was freed of everything. You have 40 plus years of teaching you one way of living. It's going to take a little unlearning. So I just learned how to trust God and follow him in that journey that he had for me.
So was that at the point where you were introduced to the Enneagram, or did that come after?
So we were introduced to the Enneagram at the Soul Formation Academy. I did not spend much time on it. It was very overwhelming to me because there was so much. I was very interested, but we were doing a lot of other things at that time. So they glossed over it pretty quickly and moved along. During that time, I was also working at an insurance company, and I was in charge of overseeing the staff and the trainings. And so we did trainings on personality tests. And so a couple of years later, after I heard of the Enneagram, I decided to teach it. Of course, I didn't know what I was doing. So I just did this huge deep dive into the Enneagram to learn all about it so I could teach others. And it was way more than I thought it was going to be. And after having gone through the Soul Formation Academy, it lined up so beautifully with everything. And to be able to understand myself in a deeper way, a more complete way, have very specific things to address, utilizing what I had learned in the Soul Formation. It was very helpful, but it was also a great help to the people at work. So
how did they experience this? Because now you've got it both in your Soul Academy or in your faith group, right? And
right. Yep.
So, and was the work secular or faith-based group?
It was secular work. Most of our staff was Christian, so there was a little bit of crossover there, but mostly I stuck with a non-faith-based way of teaching it. And it was extremely helpful. When we did the Myers-Briggs, we had about 15 staff members, and we were about half and half with the same types of people. But when we did the Enneagram, we had basically one of every type, at least one of every type. It was all so different, and it just really brought out how, we have so much in common, and yet we think so differently. And that's where, time stances came into a lot of that as well. How I interacted with my boss really changed a lot because of what I learned there. It was really, really helpful for all of us. And I was able to spend a lot of time one-on-one with people and help them kind of work through the specifics of what they were learning through it.
Let me ask you, I believe I'm correct, you're a social one with a 9 wing, correct?
Correct.
So
yes.
What was your boss's type? Do you remember?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's a type 3. And what I've learned is I really struggle with type 3s. Just I think being a reformer, I can be pretty strong in my ideas and my responses. And like you said, your first response to things is no. Honestly, that's kind of my first response too. And for him, being a 3, he's that future thinker. He wants to move forward. He gets visions and ideas that he wants to accomplish, get things done. And I was sort of his second, and he'd come to me all excited about things, and the first thing I did was put on the brakes. And that was really hard for him for a while. And so it really helped our communication to start being able to understand, this is why this is happening. This is why I do that. This is why you do that. And I was always afraid when he walked into the office, what's he got up his sleeve now? So it really helped us learn to understand how to respond to one another better.
Did you make accommodations for him and him for you? Once you knew more about each other?
Yeah. Well, you learn the language, right? You learn how to speak to one another so that it's not so overwhelming. The way that we speak to one another, we need to help understand how they're hearing us.
Yeah. So. That's an interesting, for me, that has been a huge takeaway, right? Because you think until you get a different perspective, and the Enneagram is very nuanced in its many perspectives.
Yes.
It just seems like, doesn't everybody think that way? You know,
Exactly.
I have learned not to say no out loud.
Right.
Because I'm thinking,
Yeah.
I recognize it as a fear response. I just want,
Right.
I want to make sure you're not taking anything away from me, especially my time. And so now I just pause and then I go, could I say yes to this? And is this actually going to happen, or is this just someone chatting? Right. And then I just go, wow, that sounds super interesting. And I pause. I don't say yes or no, but honestly, I have caused some friction by saying, I don't like that. Or I think, I don't know.
Right.
Or even doing a facial expression that communicates the same thing, like no. So,
especially with future thinkers.
Yeah.
I'm married to one, and I did not understand how that affected him, because I would not necessarily say no to things, but when he would have great ideas, I wouldn't be thrilled about it.
And he wouldn't champion his great idea.
Right. And, because I need time to process it. And he took that as a negative, and my boss would do the same thing. If I didn't immediately jump on board, he took it as negative. And it wasn't necessarily. I'm actually really happy to go along with people most of the time. You just need to give me a little time to get it processed first.
Exactly. Well, I think that's a great lead into time stances, what they mean, how, what's it look like with the type? So what the heck is a time stance? Because oftentimes I might know my number. I might even know some of my motivations and stuff, but time stances affect us.
Yes. So there are stances, and there's the aggressive stance. The aggressive stance is also the future stance. And that one, they always think ahead. So that those numbers would be the 3, 7, and 8. They are, and if you think about 3s, 7s, and 8s, they are raring to go. And they're thinking 10 steps ahead. They are so far of everybody else. They are the vision builders, the ones with great ideas. They, 7s especially, are built around possibilities. They love to dream, and they want everyone right there with them. The problem is they're very fast thinkers, and especially I know 7s can come up with ideas like crazy, and most of the rest of us can't keep up with that. So we tend to be kind of left behind, and they get frustrated with this. The 1s, 2s, and 6s are all present stance. They're the cooperative stance. And I'm a 1, so I'm in that stance. The interesting thing about that one is that they are still moving forward. They are doers. They are forward people. We always want to be moving into the future, but we don't process it the same way that a future person does. We don't come up with a picture first. We create our picture. So what I like to say is that a future stance is like a person doing a puzzle with the picture in front of them. They choose the pieces to create the picture that they see in front of them. At present, they are doing a puzzle without the picture. So they're creating the picture as they go along. And their future is kind of a surprise to them. They don't know what it is they're creating.
So they stand back and look at it.
Right, exactly. And if you think about it, they have an easier time handling the future because they didn't have an expectation of it to begin with, right? It's not that we can't make goals or have dreams, but we're less likely to be focused on that. We're more focused on what's happening right now. We're list makers, and we want to worry about getting things done. A future thinker doesn't want to get things done. They just want it to be done. They want to be in that picture. So sometimes future thinkers can have a hard time with the details because they don't want to make it happen. They just want it to happen. And if they surround themselves with the right people, they can make that work for them. But also future thinkers can be very disappointed because they have a very specific picture in their head. So when they get there, if it doesn't look just like they thought it should look, it can be disappointing. And also, a lot of them will move ahead. They're on to the next thing. So they might get there. Maybe it does look exactly like they wanted it to, but they can't celebrate it because they're already on to their next picture. Everybody else who's working to make that happen is really excited that they just created this thing. And the future thinker is like, oh, yeah, that's nice. Okay, now what about this? And so working with a future thinker can be really challenging because they don't really appreciate the work that you do. You know, they don't get it that you have to work so hard for something, because doesn't it just happen? And once you get to it, they're not willing to celebrate with you because they've got something else that they're going to do. But a lot of bosses and a lot of COOs, they're future thinkers. They're providing the vision. So people usually have to work with the future thinker. And then you have your past thinker. So you've got the withdrawn stance, which is the 4s, 5s, and 9. And they are, you know this, you think in a very different way than either of those. And what happens is you utilize what you know of the past for the present. You easily stop and stay where you're at. You were saying, oh, I'm good right where I'm at. I don't need to go anywhere. It's not that you can't, and it's not that you can't be excited for the future, because you absolutely can be. You just don't have the desperate need to be there like a future thinker, or
That's
you
funny.
don't desperately need to work on getting there like a present thinker. You're okay with here, and you'll be okay with there, and you'll just be wherever you are.
It's so true. I mean,
Yeah.
This is what I love about the Enneagram, right? Because I'm thinking, that's me. I had a friend ask, I was supposed to go on a trip. And my sister says, oh, are you so excited? And I paused and I thought, well, first of all, it's 3 weeks away. Lots can happen between now and then. I'll be just as excited if we go or don't go. And I mean, she looked at me like, that's weird. And I'm thinking, you know what? Things change. I just don't want it. I want to be here right now for a minute, and do this. And I have things to do. But as you're describing that, both of my teammates who are virtual, they own their own businesses. I've got a 2 and I got a 6. And I'm thinking, now this is all making sense. But I have worked with the others where it's like, excuse me, we just did this. And how come we're not even recognizing what we've done, and can you see what's happening around us here? So, but that's why I think the time stances are such an important overlay, because it's like, whoa, that person hasn't even caught up yet.
Yeah. Well, that has probably been the biggest impact on our marriage with the Enneagram. I mean, it's been good to learn the other things, but the greatest impact has been the time stances. And we talk about them all the time because it affects us all the time.
So can you give a couple of examples so people who are listening might go, oh, I see how that's playing out in my relationships, whether it's marriage or work, right? Some places where it works great, or we might come into tectonic shifts.
Right. Yeah. Well, my husband is a 7, and he's a future thinker, and he gets bored easily, and he comes up with things to fill his time. So his head space. So he might come up with some big vision of the next thing. He'll look at a house, online. He'll be looking at houses, and he'll show me a house. Here you go. Here's our next house. And when he first started doing that years and years ago, when we were first married, it really freaked me out, because I thought, oh, he's the vision caster, and now I have to work, or we're working together to get to that. That's our goal. We have to do that. And the next thing I knew, he's looking at something else. I'm like, well, what about this thing that you just showed me? What about that house? He goes, what house? I don't even know what you're talking about. So he's dreaming, he's thinking, he's coming up with visions, but his ideas are just ideas to him. They're not a goal for us to work towards. So we've had to learn in our marriage to speak very clearly to one another. So if he brings up an idea, I will ask him, is this something that you're seriously considering that I should be working with you on? Or should I just let you talk about it for a while? And if, he'll tell me either way. He isn't always dreaming about the future in a way that he doesn't want me to be involved in. A lot of the things he comes up with are things that he says, hey, yeah, let's try this. So for me, I've had to work on, how do I work with him, because I'm such a go-getter that I just want to pick it up and run with it. But how do I let him do his thing his way? And I've learned to just kind of back off and say, you know what, when you want me to be involved in this, invite me in. Otherwise, I'm just going to let you do your thing. And not with an attitude,
it's just
really
with love and understanding.
Yeah. In fact, I'm thrilled to let him do that. Now that I understand him and I go, oh, that's where that's coming from, I actually celebrate that in him. And I'm thrilled, I'm like, great, go do that, dream about that. If it becomes a thing, invite me into that. If it doesn't, whatever, have fun.
Because I'm going to be busy making things happen.
That's right. Oh, it's so true. I will never have a problem making things happen. It's constant for me. Yeah.
So that's interesting. I want to circle back to something that I said in the introduction, and that is that pressure of having to do everything perfectly because of the potential consequences. How has that changed over the years for you?
Yeah, it really helped me to learn that that's part of being a one, is to feel that burden of being right. And it's not the being right like I have to be right. It's the right, like, I know that you understand that this is the right way to do it, so I have to do that so you're happy. Right? It's really coming from, I'm making everyone happy. In school, that was my whole goal, was just to make the teacher happy. And I took a course, I was actually getting my early childhood degree, and I was doing that online. And it was all self-motivated stuff. They didn't have, but they still had instructors on the other end that were grading your papers, but they weren't teaching you. You were doing all the learning on your own and then turning stuff into them. And I found that extremely difficult because I didn't have an opportunity to get to know them. So I didn't know what pleased them. So I didn't know how to write my paper to make them happy. And that kind of exemplifies my life, right? If I'm working for someone, I'm working to make you happy. If I'm a wife, I'm working to make my husband happy. Like, I'll do it right. I'll do it your way, the right way, or I'll teach you my right way because I'm a reformer. So I understand this is the right way. This is the right way to fold clothes. So this is how we're going to fold clothes, right?
I'm less laughing because I love it.
Yeah.
I am not a one, but I definitely have learned, and I pull from some of that, but I do. It's like, no, just do it this way. It's much easier. It's better.
Yep. Yeah. So that, I think when I learned that, I was already on the path of learning how to let go and learning freedom. But when I learned about the Enneagram and that was a natural part of who I was, that was huge, because I came to understand this is how God made me. And if he made me to be like this, but he still wants me to live in freedom, what does that look like? Right? Because there still needs to be a moral balance in life. There still needs to be a way of having harmony with one another. But how do I let go and experience freedom within that? Right? So, I think it's just been a journey for me along the way, but maturity is part of that as well, learning that, one, you can't please everybody, and two, you don't have to please everybody. But also learning how to interact with people. For instance, learning how to interact appropriately with my boss. Yes, I do want to make him happy, and yes, I am feeling overwhelmed that, maybe I'm not making him happy. Maybe what I'm doing. Well, why don't you have a conversation with the guy and find out? So you learn mechanisms to help you that are healthy things. You go, oh, okay, I don't have to try to be right. I have to communicate. Let's just open up the lines of communication.
I know, but it's a pressure, and I'm not a type 1, but I do know that when you're trying to fulfill a role, whatever the role is, once we have to start asking for clarification of that, not all types, but for some of us, it's almost like a sign of I'm not quite there. I'm not good enough. I mean, it can really start the inside nasty talk that we do, which is not anywhere near freedom.
Right.
Right. And we're really not the best judges of ourselves.
Oh, no, not at all.
And neither, by the way, are the people we live with. They can give us feedback, but honestly, we're all growing in our own ways, right?
Right. Well, and I think too that it's hard when everyone around you is encouraging. That sounds kind of weird, but I've had a lot of encouragement in my life. I've had a lot of people telling me how good I am at something, or how much they appreciate me, and how great I am at whatever, or just believing in me. Oh, you're going to go off and do that? Excellent. Well, you'll be great at that. Oh yeah, that sounds like a fun thing to do. So then what happens when you don't fulfill that? That's just a whole nother level of burden, because when you have people around you that believe in you, and then you don't follow through for some reason. Let's say everybody tells you how amazing you are at your job, and then you get fired. Or they're so excited for you to go off into, a ministry at a church, and everything falls apart and you end up leaving. What do you do with that, right? I mean, it almost would be easier if everyone could say, well, see, I told you that wouldn't work out. But
oh my
now
goodness, we are definitely not the same time. If someone said, I told you that wouldn't work out, boy, it wouldn't be pretty.
Well,
I wouldn't keep my mouth shut,
great.
But internally.
But you're right. No, I mean, we wouldn't like that, but at the same time.
Does it feel like extra pressure?
It's pressure.
Yeah.
Right. It's pressure to succeed for others' sake instead of your own.
Yeah, because they believed in you, and how come you didn't live up to it? Right. Exactly. Yeah. But I loved when you were talking a little bit before, when you were talking about just growing and knowing yourself and stuff. You can just feel the sincerity and the connection you have to your heart, to your own growth, and basically to God and your own love, right? So I want to shift a little, because in the introduction we talked about, now that you work with folks, will you spend a few minutes talking about your business? I'd like to know more about that, how you help people, and who you typically work with, Mindy.
Sure. So our business is a little broad. There's individual coaching. My husband is no longer a pastor, so he's starting to do some life coaching, and I'm doing Enneagram coaching. So we both do that. Our focus is a little bit different. So mine is specifically Enneagram and soul formation connections. And so we walk through the 6-week step that I went through your Enneagram coach training. So we're going to do the 6 weeks of that Enneagram coaching. And then that helps people just learn the Enneagram in general and about themselves within that, and what that looks like, and start to get to know themselves. Then after those 6 weeks, you pretty much decide, where do you want to go from there? Do you want to continue? Do you want to go down some life coaching? Do you want to add in some soul formation to that, and just get to know yourself within your relationship with God. So that's the individual. We also provide group Enneagram training so we can do events. And we're also open to speaking at, short times at other people's events, doing retreats. My husband, of course, as a pastor, is a public speaker, and he's happy to speak at churches and various other things. And so, yeah, our desire is just to really bring that freedom to people, that bring back joy and freedom to people in a way that we don't feel like we could do. When we were in the workplace and in the church, there was just so many other kind of restrictions about how to do things, or just a lot of other things to do, because that's not what you're there for when you're at work, right? So that's really what we want to do, is have full focus on helping people get to know themselves, for relationships, for their relationship with God, anything that we can do to promote soul health.
Soul health. Okay, now my second to last question is, will you share your tagline and how you came up with it?
Yes. Our tagline is "Embrace the Adventure." And that is something that just came to me in the last few months, as we have been through a lot over the years, and we really feel like our lives are one big adventure. and as a one, gosh, sometimes it's been just crazy, and God has really taken me out of a comfort zone. And when you think life's supposed to be a certain way, living the American dream, and I thought, of course, as I'm growing up, I have to have a couple of kids and be the quintessential soccer mom, and have a house and 2 cars, and all these things. I have a job for a certain amount of time, and build up a retirement, and then you have sort of this idea of what life is supposed to look like. And God's just thrown us curveballs at every step. We have, nothing has worked out like I thought it would when I was a kid growing up. And yet that doesn't mean we haven't been successful. That means success looks different. And so embracing the adventure is just saying, just live life, right? Life's going to be what it's going to be. So just embrace it. The good, the bad, the ugly, just embrace it and live it. And that's where you find your joy and freedom. Because when we're fighting it all the time and we're trying to make things happen that just aren't happening, there's just no joy and freedom in that. So learning how to do that, and that's through getting to know yourself, getting to know yourself in God, and yourself with others. It brings all of that.
Mindy, I love the tagline. I love the genesis of it. And you're right. When we just fight what's coming down all the time, oh my God, the days are long and they're stressful and they're heavy. And when we just go, interesting, let's go. So let me ask you this. This is the last question. So folks who've been listening to you today, where is the best place for them to reach out, learn more about what you're doing, how you help people? What's the best place for them to find you?
Probably the best place is our website. That just gives everything that we do. We do have a Facebook page, Chasing the Sky, PMD, and that's a good place to start if you would like. But it doesn't have a lot of information about our business. So really going to our website is the best place to do that. And I believe you're going to post a link to that, correct?
We will, because we want people to not take notes while they're driving if they're listening to this.
That's right. Yeah.
Cool. Well, we'll put your Facebook page and your website as well. Let me ask you if there was one thing you could tell Wendy of 8 years old, if you were sitting down with her, what would you say to her?
Life's going to be okay. Just enjoy it. I was a very anxious little girl. So I would tell her, embrace the adventure. You know, it's all going to happen anyway. Just embrace it.
Oh, that's so freeing too.
Right.
Well, Mindy, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I just really enjoyed what you shared with us, but also just kind of your own journey and how you kept growing and making sense out of the moment. And just how you learned to communicate better in both your home and at work.
You've been listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author, change agent, and strategic vision coach, Sarah Box. You can grab the show notes and find out how to work with Sarah at sarahbox.com/No Labels, No Limits podcast. We'd love this podcast to reach as many people as possible. So please remember to rate, leave a 5-star review, and share the podcast with someone you think would get value from this conversation. Until next time, keep taking those daily action steps to align your purpose to your principles and achieve your goals in business and life.